Welcome to the second part of a two-part webinar series on reporting data for the 2015 Annual Homeless Assessment Report. My name is Marissa Personette, and I will be joined today by Korrin Bishop and Galen Savidge-Wilkins. We are all members of the interdisciplinary team here at Abt Associates, tasked with collecting AHAR data for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. Before we get started, if you have any questions about this presentation or other aspects of the AHAR process that were not covered in this webinar series, please submit your questions to the HUD Exchange Ask a Question portal by following the link shown here. Please make sure you select HDX as the reporting system when entering your question. This webinar series is designed to provide an introduction to the AHAR data collection process, and this presentation has three primary goals. First, to understand the 2015 AHAR data collection process. Second, to identify common data quality issues. And finally, to demonstrate methods to overcome these common issues.
We will now discuss the AHAR data collection process. To get started, we want to review some of the acronyms that you will become very familiar with during the AHAR process. The AHAR, as you know, is the Annual Homeless Assessment Report to Congress on the extent and nature of homelessness in the United States. The Housing Inventory Count, prepared by communities in January, is a point-in-time inventory of programs in the Continuum of Care for persons who are homeless. Point-in-time counts are one-night counts of sheltered and unsheltered homeless populations. The Homeless Management Information System is a software system or application designed to store and record client-level information and characteristics and service needs of homeless persons. The Homeless Data Exchange at hudhdx.info is the site developed for the submission of HIC, PIT, and AHAR data. Another valuable resource is the HDX Sandbox site. The Sandbox is a dummy HDX site that was designed for public viewing and testing of AHAR data collection screens for generating and testing uploaded files. The site is available at sandbox.hudhdx.info, and communities are strongly encouraged to utilize the Sandbox year-round to monitor AHAR data quality. However, data entered into the HDX Sandbox cannot be directly transferred to the official live HDX site for AHAR submission. There are 6 reporting categories used in the AHAR. They are separated by program type and household type. For the purposes of the AHAR, persons in households with at least one member over the age of 18 and at least one member under the age of 18 are considered in families, and all other persons are considered individuals. We generally go by a shorthand when referring to these categories. ESFAM is all people in families served in emergency shelter. ESIN is all people served in emergency shelter for individuals. THFAM is all people in families served in transitional housing. THIND is all people served in transitional housing for individuals. PSHFAM is all people in families served in permanent supportive housing. And PSHN is all people served in permanent supportive housing for individuals. There are a few programs which may serve persons who are homeless or formerly homeless and are reported in the HIC, but are not reported in this data collection process. Domestic violence programs, often called victim services or DV programs, are prohibited from participating in HMIS and thus cannot be included in the 12-month estimates. Rapid rehousing programs at the VA's and the VA supportive services for veterans families programs are forms of permanent housing and thus are not part of the estimates for homeless people. Safe havens are also excluded. Please note that there has been one major change to the AHAR submission requirements in 2015. Instead of reporting out the number of persons aged 18 to 30, communities will instead have to report separately on the number of persons aged 18 to 24 and 25 to 30. Questions regarding the change to this data element should be directed to your HMIS vendor or your AHAR liaison. The question recording zip code of last permanent residence has been hidden from view from the 2015 AHAR. This data element may still be included in an XML upload, but data corresponding to that question will not show up in the HDX. Also, we want to reinforce that the 2015 AHAR is largely unchanged. Although the new HMIS data standards went into effect in 2014, new data standards will be used in future AHARs. We developed tools to map the 2014 data standards to existing AHAR categories. If you have any questions or encounter any errors mapping existing HMIS data to the AHAR, please discuss the issue with your HMIS vendor or your AHAR liaison. If you think your community might have trouble reporting quality data for every category, it's important to remember that COCs can report in all categories or just a few categories. It's not all or nothing. For example, a COC can participate in the AHAR with only data on people in emergency shelters if the data on people in transitional housing or permanent supportive housing is not usable. Each reporting category is assessed independently for data quality using 3 thresholds. First is a 50% HMIS bed coverage rate, which is a hard cutoff. We will be unable to use any categories where less than 50% of beds in a category are in HMIS. Second, we look for reasonable bed utilization rates, typically between 65 and 105%. Bed utilization rates above 105% or below 65% may indicate data quality issues. If utilization rates are above 105%, it could indicate that projects are not exiting clients out of HMIS properly. Some other issues that could be that seasonal or overflow beds were in use on the night of the count, more on those later. Cots or cribs are used, which are not included in the count, or there are kids sharing beds. If utilization rates are below 65%, it could indicate that programs are not exiting clients out properly into the HMIS. Third, we're looking for reasonable missing data rates. This year, every question will show you the missing data rate for that question. Missing data rates above 5% may indicate data quality issues, and COCs are encouraged to provide complete data for the AHAR. The AHAR has 3 important deadlines. On October 1st, 2015, AHAR data collection began in the HDX. You're assigned a data liaison, either from AFT Associates or the University of Pennsylvania, to be your primary point of contact, and your data liaison will reach out to you around the start of the AHAR process. December 2nd, 2015 is the draft deadline for both all persons and veterans data. Draft data do not have to have all data quality questions fully addressed by this date, but communities must submit data to give their data liaisons a chance to review their submission and provide feedback. December 23rd, 2015 is the final deadline for data on both all persons and veterans. For the final deadline, data submissions must be completed and confirmed by communities. Data collection is often an iterative process, and successful communities often submit data well before these deadlines.
Next, we will discuss the AHAR process. There are several steps that communities can take to position themselves for the upcoming data collection cycle. As a first step, communities should run local HMIS reports and begin cleaning data. We recommend that COCs check their bed utilization rates, identify and find missing data, and test data in the HDX sandbox. Secondly, communities should also download and read AHAR Introductory Guide and FAQs from the HDX. As a third step, COCs can review trainings, like this one, about how to use the HDX and submit data, confirm their HIC bed numbers and bed coverage rates in the HDX, prepare notes for meetings with your AHAR data liaison, and add notes within the HDX system along the way. Be mindful of the reporting deadlines. This slide presents a general framework for submitting data to the AHAR, beginning with the initial submission of data into the HDX. Once the community submits AHAR data in the HDX, their data liaison will review it for errors, warning flags, and irregularities, along with any notes that have been submitted. Most communities require some degree of extra data cleaning or additional explanation in at least one of their submitted categories. If the data are not yet complete, the data liaison will mark any categories with issues as in progress, and communities are asked to work through any outstanding questions the liaison may have before the submission can be marked complete and considered usable. Once the data are marked as complete, COCs will be asked for a final confirmation of the data, and the AHAR staff makes final determinations about the usability of the data. We'd like to now take some time to discuss common data quality issues communities may experience. The AHAR collects point-in-time bed inventory information to assess a COC's HMIS bed coverage, determine a COC's bed capacity and utilization rate, and extrapolate homeless counts for beds that are not in HMIS. The AHAR uses the HIC submitted in January as a baseline. However, there are two key issues to address when counting beds. First, there are different types of beds. There are year-round, seasonal, voucher, and overflow, which we will provide more guidance on in the slides to follow. Secondly, you must account for beds that serve both individuals and families. As we will discuss in the next few slides, counting year-round beds and other beds that are not available throughout the year is handled differently in the AHAR. For the purposes of the AHAR, we focus on two classifications of beds. A bed is considered year-round if it is available to homeless persons throughout the year. Every year-round bed in a COC must be included in the AHAR. Year-round equivalent beds are, as the name implies, prorated based on the amount of time per year that they are available. Identifying when to calculate the year-round equivalent of beds available in a given program can be tricky. Some of the most common examples of programs that end up having their bed totals prorated are seasonally available beds, voucher programs, when a program opens or closes throughout the year, or when a given project ends up with beds that float between serving individuals and families. Counting these year-round equivalent beds can be tricky as well. It is important that you provide accurate prorated counts of the beds available to complete the AHAR question 1. The equation to do this is as follows. Number of days beds are available divided by 365 days in a year, multiplied by the number of seasonal beds available, plus any year-round beds.
Next, we'll walk through some examples. If you would like to complete these questions at your own pace, please feel free to pause the video as you work through these examples. For our first question, let's assume that a COC operates 3 emergency shelters with year-round beds for families. How many year-round emergency shelter beds are in this COC? If you answered 85, you're correct. You simply add the number of emergency shelter beds for families from Shelter A, 60, Shelter B, 15, and Shelter C, 10, which makes 85. For a second example, Shelter B operates a program with cold weather beds or code blue beds from November 1st through the end of March. How many seasonal year-round equivalent beds does Shelter B have? Because Shelter B operated the seasonal program for 5 months out of the year, or about 42% of the year, you can assume that the year-round equivalent formula to see the seasonal program had an equivalent of 21 cold weather beds in 2015. To put that differently, you have 50 seasonal beds times 0.42, or 5 out of 12, which ends up equaling 20.8, rounded up to 21. Using what we have learned in the previous 2 examples, how many total year-round equivalent emergency shelter for individual beds are there in this continuum? Let's break this down into steps. For the first step, let's calculate how many year-round beds operate during all of 2015. As we can see, there are a total of 77 beds in operation year-round. Next, let's work through the more complicated step of calculating how many year-round equivalent beds there are. Shelter A and Shelter C both operate programs for 3 months of the year. And we remember that Shelter B's seasonal program operated for 5 months. This works out to 6 year-round equivalent beds in Shelter A, 21 from Shelter B, and 9 from the seasonal program in Shelter C. In total, there's 36 seasonal equivalent beds in this continuum of care. Finally, simply add the 77 beds operating year-round to the 36 year-round equivalent seasonal beds to get your total of 113.
Another common issue is developing a bed count when your community operates a voucher program. Many communities have voucher programs, and developing an equivalent number of beds to compare it to another program can seem confusing. For individuals, the first step is to identify the total number of voucher nights that were provided during the year. The second step is to divide that total by 365 days in a year. For families, you have one more step. Multiply your total from the first two steps by the average family size served by the program. Let's walk through an example to help illustrate the process of counting voucher beds for a PSH IND program that served 100 different clients for an average of 9 months each. 9 months works out to about 270 nights in a year. Multiplied by 100 clients, that means there were 27,000 household voucher nights in 2015. Divide that by 365 days in a year, and we get 74 equivalent beds. Now, if this program were serving families, the process would involve one extra step. If we know that the average family size in the program was 2.5, we get 185 equivalent voucher beds. Providers may have beds that serve both persons in families and individuals throughout the reporting year. In the AHAR, we often refer to these beds as floating between household types. When this occurs, the bed count for each household type should be calculated in proportion to the share of individuals and persons and families served during the AHAR reporting period. The first step in counting beds that float between household types is to generate a list of clients served throughout the AHAR reporting period. Step 2 is to figure out how many people were in families versus individuals. Step 3 is to calculate the proportion of people in families and individuals against the total population for the reporting period. Finally, multiply those proportions by the total number of beds at the program. Here's an example of a program that has floating beds. St. Mary's Emergency Shelter has a total of 50 beds that float among individuals and persons and families. During the AHAR reporting period, the program served 200 people. 25% were individuals and 75% were persons and families. How many beds should be reported for individuals and families? To calculate the number of beds to be reported for individuals, we take the total number of beds, 50, and multiply it by the proportion of beds for individuals, 25%, which equals 12.5 beds for individuals. For families, we take the total number of beds, 50, and multiply it by 75%, which equals 37.5 beds for families.
A second key concept used throughout the AHAR data collection process is bed utilization rate. Utilization rates, also known as bed or unit occupancy rates, represent the percentage of beds or units that are occupied. Utilization rates can be calculated on a given night or on an average night over a period of time. Utilization rates can also be calculated at the individual program level, for example, a particular shelter, at the program type level, for example, emergency shelters, or at the COC level. To calculate the overall bed utilization rate for a community on a given night, take the number of people served on that night and divide it by the number of beds available on that night. AHAR thresholds for bed utilization rates are between 65 and 105%. Bed utilization rates below 65% are usually attributed to either the program did not enter all their clients into the HMIS and thus appears to be underutilized, or the program was genuinely underutilized. Bed utilization rates above 105% are often explained by the program did not capture exit dates for all their clients, or the program offered overflow beds, such as cots or mattresses, sporadically throughout the year to accommodate high demand nights. This results in a larger count of persons, but the same number of year-round beds. As representatives of your community, it is important to ask yourself, does the utilization rate make sense? Again, as we walk through these examples, if you would like to complete these questions on your own, please feel free to pause the video. Here is an example of bed utilization. What is the bed utilization rate for a provider with 200 beds if they serve 180 individuals on a given night? If you answered 90%, you are correct. To get this number, you simply divide 180, the number of individuals, by 200, the number of beds, and multiply that by 100 to get the percent.
A third concept is reporting the number of households. Remember, when reporting households for the purposes of AHAR, a family must contain at least one adult over the age of 18 and at least one minor under the age of 18. This necessarily means that for all FAM reporting categories, number of persons in households should be at least twice the number of households. A simple rule of thumb can help you when looking at data in your prior submission. In a family reporting category, if the ratio of people to households is less than 2, then you definitely have a data problem. If the ratio of people to households is greater than 5, you might have a data problem. Large families like this across the whole community are relatively uncommon. If you have this scenario in your community, please include a note explaining why this is not an issue that we should be concerned about. Putting yourself in the shoes of a data reviewer, take a look at the following programs serving persons and families. Which household count is incorrect and potentially indicative of larger data problem? As you know, the AHAR family must contain at least one adult over the age of 18 and at least one minor under the age of 18. Therefore, it will be impossible to have only 10 people in 10 households.
Your data liaison is here to help you work through data quality issues, such as the examples we have gone over here during the AHAR data collection process. However, it can be helpful to monitor potential issues with your data throughout the year so that you can easily address them during the AHAR collection process. Changes within communities are common and don't necessarily reflect bad data. New programs can open, existing programs can close, programs can start serving persons of a different household type, and several other things. Communities should review their PIT methodology and counts during the year to ensure accuracy. And documentation is key. As we have reiterated many times during this series, the notes function is an important tool to getting a complete submission. Many data quality questions data liaisons ask of communities simply require some extra explanation that can be documented in real time. There are resources out there for communities to improve data quality outside of the AHAR process. Links to the current data quality toolkit and data quality presentation are available here and are available in the HUD Resource Exchange. Now that you have a better understanding of the AHAR, let's talk about next steps. In addition to recordings of this webinar series, we have developed resources to support you during the AHAR data submission process. A comprehensive introductory guide to the AHAR process and a detailed frequently asked questions document are available on the HDX homepage. Data collection for the 2015 AHAR begins October 1st. Before you start submitting data in HDX, some common first steps are checking to see if your COC has expanded HMIS bed coverage, improved data quality, simplified the AHAR reporting process, or identified new COC data review processes. If you have any questions, please make sure that you review the AHAR introductory guide and FAQ documents. The intro guide has a tip sheet at the end to outline how liaisons check your data for quality. Also, remember that you can ask your AHAR liaison. Another option is to submit a question through the Ask a Question function on the HUD Exchange website. Make sure to select HDX as your program system when asking the question. Thank you all for joining us for this webinar. As a reminder, if you have additional questions, please submit them through the HUD Exchange Ask a Question. This webinar and other resources are available on HDX homepage. Please reach out to your data liaison if you have specific questions. You can obtain information or assistance from the HUD Exchange by searching the resource library, using the Ask a Question function, or requesting technical assistance.